Welcome back, everyone, to Sentimental Elephants, a musical journey. Uh, as you may know if you've watched the previous videos, and I'll fill you in if you haven't watched them. Um, this is a music appreciation series. I'm going through the alphabet, associating a musical artist with each letter, and talking about my experience with them, my how I got into them, and what their music is meant to be. We got high the last video, and today we will be having a J, which seems a little bit backwards to me. For those of you who don't know me, I don't drink or smoke or do anything else, so drug humor will, of course, always be very awkward for me. I just want to address a couple of things. First up, we had another technological issue which I've had to resolve. Which is say using my new phone. I had to replace my phone, so this is a whole new device. I hope it works out. And another thing I want to touch on is that last time we wound up doing H and I. Now there was a long break between videos between C and D, about a year, and there's some sort of technological issues there that happened there as well as sort of some personal things. But when I first started doing this channel, started doing these videos, I put together a list of the whole alphabet, and I just made sure I, had an artist for each letter, knowing that I might change some things here and there as it went along. And I'm not, just going to be doing that list. Hopefully, once we get to the end of the alphabet, I will continue doing these. I mean, I hope that I can keep doing them, so I can cover some other artists and just tell my stories with them. But I had that list, and I wasn't sure when it was when I started doing them again. So I was kind of going back to the list, and there are some conscious changes that I made and said, okay, initially I was going to be doing this. I remember that, but actually I'm going to do this other artist. Now, with regards to the last video I made, which was H and I did two at once, talking about the music of Australia. One for, focusing on hunters and collectors and Icehouse, and I'm pretty satisfied with how that turned out. But there was one artist for the letter I. I was originally on my list, and I didn't even mention them when I was talking about the I artists before I moved on to talking about hunters and collectors and Icehouse. And I feel a little remiss on this because that artist is Jason Isbell, who is absolutely one of my favorite musicians, one of my favorite songwriters. Hopefully I can come back and do a video on him later, but I felt a little bad about not mentioning him at all because he's a very important artist to me. So Jason Isbell, if you're not familiar, go look up his stuff. He's incredible. So here we are, as I said, at the letter J. So where's J? J is for Elton John, amazing songwriter, many great albums and songs. Jayhawks, who are a very fine, I guess you could call them alt country band, alternative country band from Minnesota, and I did get to see them live. And their album, The Sound of Lies, has a very special place in my heart. Joe Jackson. Jim James, who's the lead singer of My Morning Jacket, Jethro Tull, legendary progressive rock or whatever, however you want to put them in a slot. I feel that they're unique unto themselves. They could be in a bunch of different genres. Jesus and Mary Chain, legendary Scottish band. Billy Joel, fine songwriter. Haven't loved all of his stuff, but he's written enough and made enough music that's been very special to me. Jamiroquai, I'll always mention. Hey, most people in North America got into them on their third album, but I got into them on their first album, so I was a little bit ahead of the grade there. It's a weird thing to be proud of, but I'll take what I can get. Norah Jones and her incredibly relaxing music. Another confession is sorry, Norah. Your first album is very beautiful, but it took a long time before I heard it all the way through because I would put it on late at night, and quite frankly, by the end of it, I was having beautiful dreams while your music was playing in the background. It's not an insult for me. I know that's not doesn't mean that music is boring if I fall asleep to it. Boring music does not make me fall asleep. Boring music annoys me. But it was so peaceful, and I would be listening to it, and well, in a position where I could drift off, and by golly, drift off I did. Uh, and J is also for the Jefferson Airplane. I was actually into Jefferson Airplane more initially more than the Grateful Dead. For me, they were the quintessential San Francisco band from the '60s. I'm more of a Deadhead now, but I still love those Jefferson Airplane albums. Haven't really listened too much Jefferson Starship, and Starship is kind of a whole different creature. I won't touch that one, but definitely Jefferson Airplane are much more than just the few songs that frequently get played. So what am I doing for the letter J? Well, the letter J is for. I'm holding it upside down. Could you tell? J is for Joy Division. And also associated with Joy Division, New Order. I'll be doing both bands, mostly focusing on Joy Division, but I do want to touch on New Order because I think they're a fine band in their own right. So Joy Division is a legendary Manchester band. I used to have a Joy Division t-shirt. A lot of people have that particular Joy Division t-shirt. I don't have it anymore. I hope I can get it replaced at some point. But I am wearing a t-shirt from another legendary Manchester band, The Fall, who I covered under the letter F. Something that was this kind of particular attitude with Manchester bands. Some very interesting creative ones that have come from Manchester. As I mentioned before, The Fall, Oasis had a bunch of great songs. I still enjoy that band. Happy Mondays, another legendary band, kind of kicked off the sort of, I guess what was known as the baggy sound, the Manchester sound. I'm not sure where the term baggy comes from, but I've heard it associated with that group of bands. Also Stone Roses, who, their self-titled albums still landmarks, and kind of In Spiral Carpets is my own kind of little favorite band. They weren't really considered. I don't know if they were thought of as one of the major Manchester bands, but I really enjoyed them. Cool organ-driven sound. Made me think a bit of the Doors. But we're talking about Joy Division now. Just going to throw in a bit of very quick history about Joy Division for those of you who might not be familiar. They're originally named, I believe they originally started out as Stiff Kittens, and then became Warsaw, and then became Joy Division. The lineup was Ian Curtis on lead vocals, and I believe he was the primary and possibly sole lyricist. Also Bernard Sumner, also who went by a couple of different names, Bernard Dicken, Bernard Albrecht, but I believe is actually the name he's gone by most consistently was Bernard Sumner, lead guitar, and some keyboards. Stephen Morris on drums, Peter Hook on bass, and that was the Joy Division lineup. They're from Manchester. Came to prominence in the late '70s. It was one of the first really key bands to be signed to the Factory Records label, and they had a number of great singles. They had 2 albums, Unknown Pleasures, which is the one I showed you, and it's the one you'll see most on the t-shirts, and their second album, which came out after the end of the band, which was Closer. I initially thought it was pronounced Closer, but it is pronounced Closer, and there's 2 compilations which don't have that. There's a little tiny bit of overlap, but mainly they're both distinct and collect together the singles, which are Still and Substance. So they're the other part of if you want to get if you're like me and still own hard media, and if you want to make sure you cover all of the bases, you'll want to get those 2 compilations as well. Now, one of the things that most people know of this band was that they ended in tragedy. Ian Curtis, their lead singer, he lived with a number of health issues and mental health issues. He lived with depression and was epileptic, and these caused a lot of difficulties in his life, and sadly he ended up taking his own life. and that does cast a certain shadow over the band and their perception. Um, After a bit, the band did uh, reconvene, but they changed because it was a new band. It was not going to be the same without Ian Curtis, and changed their name to New Order with the three remaining members. And after a bit, they brought in a fourth member, which is Stephen Morris's then girlfriend, later wife, Gillian Gilbert. She came in as a keyboard player, and that became New Order. Now, I heard of Joy Division first. I knew them as a name. I think I knew a little bit about the circumstances of how the band ended, but I did know the name Joy Division first, even if I hadn't heard the music. But the first band of those two bands that I actually heard was New Order. I believe it was the Low Life album, and it was played on the local radio station. And they mentioned their history, and that really, I thought, wow, this is a great sound. It's kind of pop, but it has a little bit of an edge to it, and it's like a little unsettling. And Love Vigilantes and Perfect Kiss were, I believe, the songs I knew from that album. A little bit later, I heard my first Joy Division song, which was one of their last singles. I'm not sure. I think it might have come out after the passing of Ian Curtis. I wouldn't swear to it, but that was Love Will Tear Us Apart. Um, I'll be frank. Actually, I don't really take to that song initially. Now, oddly enough, Paul Young, who was, I don't know if some of you might not be old enough to remember Paul Young. He was a pop singer at the time. He was British, and he had a number of hits. And he did a cover of Love Will Tear Us Apart. I heard that first, and I guess just kind of associated with being this kind of, bright but still kind of sad sort of pop song. And then I heard the original version by Joy Division, and the vocals, and it's just where I was at the time. This is my part of my musical development is where I was. The vocals just seemed kind of weird. I couldn't quite take to those vocals. I couldn't quite grasp them at the time. So it's like I wasn't ready for it, you know. I just think, okay, I don't know. I just thought, okay, well, this is a band, and I don't know if I'll ever really get into these guys. I like New Order, but it's like, okay, and this is where they came from, and cool, but I didn't, they're kind of strange vocals. They're, it's not classically beautiful singing. Uh, but later on, I think a few years later, time passes. I grow up a bit more. This is in my teens. This is the 1980s. I was born in 1970. Okay, so I mentioned that before. And in my late teens, start kind of moving into, edging more into. I'm getting to know myself a bit more, and my tastes are evolving. I'm getting more to the alternative music at the time, not alternative rock as it was later, kind of co-opted in the mid '90s, but bands like The Cure and Depeche Mode and the Smiths and that sort of thing are becoming more relevant to me, and I'm kind of learning a bit more about myself and my own psyche. And it was a TV program. I'm not sure. It might have been the New Music or one of these other sort of TV shows that covered modern music, but there was a section on it. There was a segment on a feature on Joy Division. I think it was when the compilation Substance came out, and they played a video during this. They kept coming back to it, of the song Atmosphere, and I was really captivated by it. I thought it was very beautiful. It was quite haunting, and it just worked its way into my soul. It's like, oh, and the voice didn't seem as weird. It was fragile and kind of mournful, and there seemed like there might be a little thread of hope in the song, but it was like acknowledging the sadness. And I'm learning, like I said, I was learning more about myself as a person, and I have a fairly kind of dark personality. I'm kind of melancholy, and this is having more meaning to me. And it's like the phrase that kept coming back: "Don't walk away in silence." And it just worked its way into my psyche. I was like, I need to come back to this band. I need to learn more about it. And bit by bit, I think I got Substance first, which covered, some of the Warsaw material and like later single. At least I knew some of the singles on it. Transmission, I knew Love Will Tear Us Apart. And this time, this song resonated with me more. I kind of got it now. Maybe I don't know if I've fully grasped it ever, but there's so many parts of that song that just hit home, and heard Atmosphere and many of these songs on it. Wait, I was now, I don't know, I was now on my path where I could appreciate this music. I then got all the other albums, and they were kept playing them quite frequently on repeat, probably to the annoyance of probably some people who knew me. But it had resonance. It was very meaningful to me. A lot of the lyrics. Now I want to talk a little bit about. Like Ian Curtis, I do live with depression, and maybe that was what a big part of it. What sort of drew me into this band and into this music. And frequently I'll hear, I'm not just said about Joy Division or other artists or other sort of works, and they'll say, "Well, it's depressing. Oh my God, that's so depressing." And sometimes I think, no, it's not depressing. It's sad. It's not everything is happy, and brings up resonance. There's that word again, but just empathy with the sadness of someone's experience. That's one of the reasons I listen to music. It's not the only one, but it's I do get drawn towards sad songs. I remember talking with a friend at high school at the time, who was into Joy Division. He was also one of the first Deadheads that I knew, which is a kind of interesting blend. It's like, I think really somebody would be into Joy Division and the Grateful Dead, but then again, so am I. But he said something to the effect of saying, a lot of people say their music is depressing, but they just kind of saying that because of what happened with Ian Curtis. But it's not depressing. It's like, well, I can see where he was coming from with that. I don't know if I can fully agree with that. Some of the music, I don't say it's depressing, but it is talking about depression, and the way it feels like to experience. I find it very haunting and very meaningful. One of my favorite, or somebody who always does, I won't mention any names, somebody who does reaction videos. They've kind of stopped doing music ones, although they're still doing reaction videos, but they're not really. But I loved watching this person's reaction videos. It always gave usually quite enthusiastic and very candid. Was very honest of what the hearing this music for the first time, how it felt to them. And they did Love Will Tear Us Apart. And at the end they said, this is probably the song that I've listened to in this project that I've enjoyed the least. It's like, oh, well, it's too bad. But I get that it's not for everyone. But they did say, it's like, yeah, they did give full credit to Ian Curtis. It's like, yeah, they're giving a very honest account of what it's like to live with depression, and that, and it said, it's very brave for them to do, and let's take a moment here that, as I said, I live with depression, and it's a part of my life, and I know it could be a part of a lot. I know it's a part of a lot of other people's lives. This is my little PSA. I'm going to say here: if you find yourself, when you're living with depression and you feel that you don't have any hope, reach out. Please do. There's there are resources and there's people there. You might not think anyone cares. There are people out there who care and who want to help you. And I know it's not always easy. It's not always easy to reach out. Sometimes you just feel completely walled in. But if you can, please find the strength in you to take that step, and you know, because you are a unique human being, and can't the world can't lose you. So please, do what you can to be healthy, and if you can't carry it on can't carry the burden on your own, there's people out there who want to help you. Okay, got a little maudlin there, so I apologize, but that is very important to me. Because one thing I remember, there's a documentary on Joy Division. There's also a very good movie about Ian Curtis called Control. There's another one about the Manchester music scene in general called 24 Hour Party People. But there's a documentary on Joy Division, and Tony Wilson, who is the head of the Factory Records label they were on, and he was very invested in this band. And Ian Curtis's girlfriend, Anika Nore, was going to him saying, I'm very concerned about Ian, reading the things that he's writing, and I'm worried for him. And Tony Wilson was saying, no, it's okay. It's art. It's poetry. But it's fine. And Tony Wilson said later that he carried the regret for that moment for the rest of his life, because he felt he should have done more. So again, on the other side of things, if you know somebody who you think is in trouble, don't hesitate to reach out to them and try and lend a hand. It goes both ways. But the fact is that, going back to the lyrics, he's talking about things that a lot of people deal with and a lot of people have to live with. Life isn't always sunshine and roses. There can be a lot of frustration, a lot of sadness, and it is a part of life, and it's a very big part for some people's lives. There's a lyric that really echoes in me strongly, from the song 24 Hours, which went, just for a moment, thought I'd found my way. Destiny unfolded. I watched it slip away. And I felt that. I felt that at a number of times. I'm not trying to make this too much about me, but this is a fairly intense band, and it does stir up some fairly intense emotions, and they should be acknowledged. Now, I've talked a lot about the lyrics, but the sound was very bold. Just the music, it's quite bracing. It feels quite unique. I mean, I feel that anything after the words that might have sounded along the Joy Division line was probably inspired by them, in part, or from another band that was inspired by them. The guitars could just be so kind of jagged. This is like, they weren't playing the standard sort of power chord sound. Sometimes it just was like this very thin sound. It was like this big Marshall stack. It was like it's like very cutting. The bass playing was like a very melodic sort of lead bass. It was less keeping the rhythm going. I believe the story was that in their rehearsal space, there was another band that was like right in the next room, and it kept leaking through. So Peter Hook had to develop this particular very hot, trebly, highly amped style that kind of cut through it, and so it was the bass was kind of on top rather than underneath, just so he could hear himself. The drums, I'm not sure quite how to describe them. They're definitely not like any other drum sound you could imagine. A big part of this, a big part of their sound, was their producer Martin Hannett, who was created this fascinating. It was like kind of claustrophobic sound, and it was like you'd hear. It's like hearing echoes rattling off radiators, and it was really incredible sound across all the bands. He was actually an early producer of U2. I believe the story went with that he produced their first EP, which is called U2 3, but he was not available for their first album, Boy, which was because of the passing of Ian Curtis. So their first few albums, the first 3 U2 albums were produced by Steve Lillywhite for that reason. But Martin Hannett's a legend in his own right. Again, if you can ever opportunity to watch the movie 24-Hour Party People, it's just fascinating. He's played by the guy who played Gollum in the Lord of the Ring movies. Just my brain's like pudding right now. Sorry, Anthony Serkis. There we go. but he's one of the more fascinating characters in the movie and in Manchester music history. I just want to work in the band. I just recently did a little bit of a workout campaign to the band Bauhaus, and they're actually, I found it similar in the two bands similar in a particular way, in that this is one band that was really effectively 3 bands. You can say the same thing about both bands, about Bauhaus and Joy Division. There's the singles band, the albums band, and the live band, and there were 3 very separate creatures. In the case of the albums, they were a little bit more experimental. I keep using that word a lot, but is a bold, further out sound. The singles tended to be a bit punchier, and live they were just this kind of ferocious monster, just very take no prisoners in both cases. I mentioned the sound of the albums, the going further out. Again, this one, Unknown Pleasures. The last track on it is called I Remember Nothing. And as it's playing out, and it's kind of got this sort of drone-like sound, but they keep getting punctuated by the sound of breaking glass. And by the end of the album, by the end of the song, by the end of the album, there's just this hail of breaking glass. And I was like, wow, what a way to just, that's the closing statement of this album. It's just like the world just shattering. I was like, I thought it was one of the most incredible finishes to any album ever. So I do want to talk a bit about New Order. Now, I absolutely love New Order. I don't have a huge amount to say about them, but I greatly enjoy their records. A big part of it, I mean, if you listen to the earlier first album, which was, I think it was Movement, I believe, at least their first album and earlier singles, they're In a Lonely Place, and I'm going to cheat here and look this up. Yeah, Ceremony. It was the first single. And I have heard that early recordings, it was done by Joy Division first. Didn't come out at the time. But they originally did it as Joy Division, and then later re-recorded it as New Order. And the first album and single, so a bit more keeping in the Joy Division sound. First couple of albums, and then they started going into a more of a kind of a techno dimension. They're learning more about getting more into sort of dance-oriented music, and we'll just say certain things that were attached to dance culture at the time, and dance music culture. And there's a drastic change in sort of overall attitude and sound, and it brightened, and it's kind of like felt like they're coming out of their mourning period, and it still had in particular in their videos. They have a lot of lovely weird videos. True Faith is sort of the classic weird New Order video, uh, and but and a little bit of the edge, and there's a little bit of a acidic quality with slipped in with the more joyous kind of pop sound. I guess kind of ironically, New Order was a little more joyful than Joy Division in their sound, but uh, they've got a lot of wonderful tracks, and then it's sort of we when you're able to come out of the shadows and see the sunshine a bit, when you can appreciate more, you can put that on, and it can just fill you up, fill you up with a sort of a brighter, more joyous sound. Um, it's not Joy Division. Ultimately it became not Joy Division, but its own wonderful, unique thing. It's not really, as I was saying, it's not more straightforward pop. If there's anything wrong with in and of itself with straightforward pop, but it's got a bit more bite to it. And I say there's weirdness. This compilation Substance is a really good starting point. Just check out the singles on that. But they've got a lot of good albums too. Power, Corruption, and Lies is one of my all-time favorite album titles, and also a great album. The Technique is a great album too. They had one of the biggest selling 12-inch singles of all time. I think it was what had the record, which was Blue Monday. And the story goes that the person who created the cover of it had this sort of very elaborate design for the jacket of the 12-inch the 12-inch single, and it was so elaborate. I think it was in the design of an old style computer disc, and it was so elaborate that I believe said that they actually lost money on the on every copy they sold, because the jacket of it was so expensive to make. They figured, no, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's a 12-inch single. It hardly have, people hardly buy any of them, so it's not that big a thing. And it winds up being the biggest selling 12-inch single of all time. So they kept reissuing it, but with like a less elaborate sleeve. But it's one of the few bands who's I'm not really too big on remixes, but I enjoy New Order remixes as well. This is a band that's got a special place in my heart as well too. It's not the same place as Joy Division, but it's got its own place, and you can just kind of really lose yourself in this music. So that's New Order. So we'll be so that's pretty much all I've got to say about those two bands. Hope you're intrigued. If you don't know them all bands already, you can listen to some of their tracks and see if it's to your taste. So that brings this chapter of Sentimental Elephants to a close. So be coming back next time with K. So thanks for coming along for the ride, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.